Let's go.
Hi, everybody. This is Elena from Cross Cultural Development, and you are listening to the first episode of Bed in Culture podcast. The show where we gonna master the art of cultural collaboration, where the professionals will learn how to grow and to thrive in the multicultural world we live and work in today, and how to become the real global game changers. So this is episode number 1. I'm very proud of it. And I am not doing it alone today. I have a guest, and in every episode there will be a new guest, and we will be talking about different subjects within this huge topic. And today we are gonna unpack the why behind the importance of cultural awareness, because I think that is the basics, and what can be the results of having or consequences of not having the awareness for modern organizations. And as I said, we have a guest, and today's guest is Coco Hofs, and she is a colleague of mine. So I couldn't find a better person to start this conversation with all of you guys. And I will explain why, because she is the owner of Cross Cultural Solution. This is the company that helps organizations to overcome cultural differences, and how these organizations can conduct their business in the most effective way and achieve the best possible results in the global environments they operate. She is not only a colleague of mine, she is also about somebody who has a similar background. So she started in international corporate, and a couple of years ago, as if I'm correct, if not, you will correct me, she did what she herself calls a leap of faith. She decided to follow her passion in order to fulfill her mission. And her mission is to convert a group of bright, international, multicultural, ambitious individuals into a high-performing cross-cultural team, and to help leaders, to equip leaders with tools to lead those teams into the future. Coco, welcome. Great to have you here.
Thank you very much. Wow, what an introduction. And it's an honor to be a guest in the first episode of this very, very cool podcast. So thank you very much for having me.
I hope it's our chemistry, it's our energy that I hope will make it great. So welcome again. Coco, I just did this short introduction. You liked it? I'm glad. But actually, before we start to dive deep into this huge topic of cultural awareness and its importance in conducting business, I want to give the listeners the opportunity to get to know you a little bit more. Can you tell us about your personal professional journey?
Oh, absolutely. Thanks a lot. So I am Dutch, born and raised from the Netherlands. However, in 2016, so it's now 2024. So about a couple of years ago, I moved away from the Netherlands, and I got the opportunity to move to Singapore, followed by Japan. Japan was followed by Chile, Latin America, Chile followed by Peru, and so on and so on. And today I actually divide my time in between the Netherlands and Latin America, because my partner is from Chile. So part of my expat assignment, it was not part of the plan to fall in love with the local, but that happened. So I'm in a cross-cultural relationship as well. And so we basically divide our time in between the Netherlands and Latin America. That is a little bit me on a personal level, but of course, as you said, also professionally. So it was in Japan in 2017 when I realized how big the impact of culture is on how we see the world, how we believe certain things are wrong or right, how things should be done. I think you can relate, but especially in Japan, I realized how big that impact is on how we do business, how we work together, how, in my case, leading a team of people coming from all over the world. And I realized that was not a quick fix, let's put it like that. I tried to do a lot of self-study and self-awareness and so on, but at the same time, it is much more complex and much deeper than just watching a TED Talk and educating yourself. So fast forward, like you said, the leap of faith. It was in 2021 when I left the corporate world. I left the H&M group and started my own company. And with that, I'm helping organizations like, for example, an H&M or other big international players on how to overcome these cultural differences. And I believe there's no wrong or right. I know that you agree with me on that one. There is no wrong or right when it comes to culture, or I don't think anyone should adapt to anyone or whatsoever. But if we eventually, as human beings in an international environment, are more aware of how culture impacts our behavior, and we are more aware of how we come across towards each other, I believe that business results will increase, work, well-being of people will improve, and so on and so on. So, yeah, I don't know. Did I answer your question?
Yes, yes, you did. But you know what? It's very curious. You're the first person who said, who I ever heard saying, I understand the cultural differences in 2017 in Japan. So it's like was it like an aha moment for you, or it still was like gradual something? When did you start to
No,
notice
yeah,
that the people differ not only like individuals but also as representatives of different culture?
absolutely. No, I mean, wow. I think I can talk for hours just about that realization in Japan, but I mean, I think everyone knows, Japan is an island and it is a very, very unique culture. It's a one of a kind. No judgment on that one, but it's very, very unique. Um, and my employer at the time
Yeah.
really supported me on, working and living in Japan. So I learned a lot, right? I was super supported in terms of how to navigate Japan, how to live there, what things to know, do's and don'ts and whatsoever. But the challenge was that when I was in my work, I had a team of Japanese, Chinese, people from Hong Kong. My boss was American. I worked for a Swedish company. I had colleagues from all over the world. So all that knowledge about Japan was absolutely useless, really, because of course it didn't really work. So, because the environment that I had to operate in was much more multicultural than just Japanese. So that was one realization that I thought, oh my God, but if I need to learn all the ins and outs of all the cultures that I'm working with, then I need 5 assistants to keep up with I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
And second of all, I remember really, really clear that I gave a presentation to the management team, which was a group of approximately 20 people, more or less, coming from all over the world, right? So I think there were maybe 15 or 16 cultures present. And I gave a presentation, and at a certain point, I asked them in smaller groups to discuss something and then to present to the group. And everyone interpreted the question differently. And I realized, like, how is it possible? I gave the exact same presentation. I asked the exact same thing, and everyone interpreted it in a different way. Well, I believe that, of course, every individual is unique, right? So also what you just said, when did I realize that it was not only individuals that you need to understand, but there's also such thing as culture, is because I saw a tendency. I saw a tendency of how, for example, the Chinese in my team had a different interpretation or different behavior than the Japanese. Or I saw a tendency that Swedes, my Swedish colleagues were really aiming for agreement when we had to make a decision. So at a certain point, I saw a tendency of patterns. And then I realized, yeah, I'm sorry for my language, like, shit, right? I mean, as much as I really want to see the individual, I think culture really plays a part here. And it was in Japan, especially because, yeah, all the knowledge that I gained on Japanese was absolutely useless because I was working with so many more cultures than only Japanese.
But do I
Yeah.
understand you correctly? Then actually, it is your cultural sensitivity that helped you actually, and not the preparation or the tools that you got when somebody's supposed to get a position like that. You expect the company to do more on educating, on equipping this person. So it's
Yeah.
actually
Beautiful.
somebody
Yeah.
in your situation, which is not that culture sensitive, might miss these differences,
Yeah.
these
Could be. Yeah.
nuances.
I think, yeah, I mean, you never know, of course, but I do believe, and I agree with you, that um, yeah, I think it was the cultural sensitivity also, and that of course also comes from a natural curiosity, right? Like, I mean, if you couldn't care less, yeah, then obviously I don't think it will be.
Yeah,
You can be as cultural sensitive, but if you don't really care or if you're not genuinely curious, then I think it's gonna be a hard road, right, or a complicated path. But I have always been curious about human behavior as such, right? So from a very early age, I have always been curious, like what drives people and why people behave differently and why, if I press that button with person A, something different happens when pressing the same button with person B and so on. So yeah, operating in such an international environment as I was operating in, I think you need cultural sensitivity in order to get what you need to achieve. Because, in international environment, we have targets, goals. Um, you need to be able to
KPIs.
influence others in order to get what needs to be achieved and so on. Um, yeah, so without that sensitivity, I mean, I don't think it's impossible. It's just gonna take much more time, really.
Yeah. Do you think? Do you think from your experience now for the last couple of years now that you are working with the companies from the not in but outside,
Yeah.
and you can see that from a helicopter view, when you're in the picture you don't see the frame, so you're coming from that. Because what I see very often, that organizational leaders, HR managers, they really, the moment we talk about individual differences, we're on the same line. Every company has a disc or a TMA or whatever, profile dynamics. Everybody knows about how to, that this person need to be talked in a different way to, or behaved around in a different way. But even people of this high level actually miss the awareness on how the cultural differences can influence that. Do you notice that as well? Do you see that
Yeah.
with your clients?
Yeah, I love how you emphasize also that that a lot of organizations, indeed, they invest a lot of time, effort, energy on individual development, right? So, and in order to do individual development, you need to address individual differences. And there, indeed, I agree with you. I see the same. We embrace the differences because diversity brings us further and it helps us innovate.
Oh,
And yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think to come back to what you were saying, like that individual differences are more addressed rather than cultural differences. Yes, I agree. I see the same. I also understand why, though, because addressing cultural differences, a lot of organizations are, let's say, hesitant. I wanted to say afraid, but I think hesitant is a better word. Um,
more
you
diplomatic.
know,
It's more diplomatic when
it's
they
more
don't
diplomatic.
communicate.
Yes, exactly. Yes, absolutely. I think a lot of organizations are hesitant because addressing cultural differences suggests that everyone coming from the same culture is the same and that we put people in boxes. And people don't like to be put in boxes, which is why we avoid addressing cultural differences as such.
Yeah.
I completely understand that. I completely understand because I'm Dutch from origin. And of course, not all Dutch people are the same. We all know that every individual is unique. So I completely understand the hesitation on why organizations don't want to address this. However, what is the risk of not addressing that is that uh, we basically ignore the fact that there are cultural differences and our brain is wired in a certain way. So culture is learned behavior and it's captured in our brain. And if we don't address the cultural differences, so basically people being wired in a different way, then we evaluate, assess, address, judge the behavior of others through our own cultural reference.
Yeah.
And this I will give a super simple example that I think speaks to everyone. Dutch people have learned that confrontation, let's say raising your hand if you have a question, speaking up if you have doubts, asking questions for additional clarification, everything, let's say, is basically that is in the umbrella of confrontation. We culturally learn that you need to speak up.
Yeah.
In Asia, generalizing, but let's say Singapore, they learn that speaking up, raising your hand, addressing doubts whatsoever is bad, right? So it's the extreme opposite of what Dutch people learn. So imagine that you have Dutch and Singaporeans in one room, and Singaporeans are silent, and Dutch people are always speaking. The perception from Dutch people towards Singaporeans is they are shy, they don't have anything to say, or they're not asking any questions, so everything is clear, because
And
that is
no,
what it would
they're
mean in.
stupid. They don't understand it. They're not. They're not.
Mm,
Yeah. It goes. It
mm.
can go that far. Yeah. 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 Sorry to interrupt.
No, no, great, no, absolutely, and and because the behavior of those Singaporean colleagues has a meaning in the Dutch culture, but it has a different meaning in the Singaporean culture. And not addressing these super simple, low hanging fruit differences, yeah, that basically, uh, that the consequence of that is that we evaluate the behavior of others in our own reference. Yeah, and then obviously, yeah, then it's a
Not
very
based on
complicated topic.
trust, right? The trust is
Correct.
needed. Because the Singaporeans see the Dutch as arrogant
See, of
and
course, like,
and
yeah,
not pleasant people to work with. Yeah, not to be
no,
docile. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, and we don't, but so again, I understand the hesitation because people don't like to be put in boxes, which is why we're not addressing culture. The challenge is that if you don't, then everyone addresses people's behavior, navigate the cultural differences that are present in every international organization through what they think is wrong or right. Yeah, and then of course it becomes more complicated. Let's put it
and you
like that.
will never will make organization inclusive in this way.
No, I think diversity, inclusion. I mean, you probably agree with me. Hot topic. Every organization wants to put it on their agenda.
Container.
Exactly, exactly. And don't get me wrong, I think it's an extremely important topic, and I think the whole world has a long way to go. But cultural diversity, so cultural differences are not there to be eliminated. They're actually a good thing, but
To be
they're,
understood. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. But they need to be understood, and they need to be people need help how to navigate them. I mean, the other day I worked with a Dutch company that was invited to do a sales pitch in Brazil.
hmm
Extreme, culture from a cultural perspective, extremely interesting dynamics, Dutch and Brazilians. And they completely screwed up because they addressed their sales pitch from the very Dutch perspective, but their audience was Brazilian, and they completely screwed up and they missed the deal. And this is when they called and they said, Coco, we need your help because this cannot happen again. This was $1 million 10-year contract. Yeah.
Exactly.
And I mean, so I always say, if you go on holiday to Thailand, genuine curiosity towards culture is probably enough, right? It will help you to navigate your holiday. But if your business success depends on your capabilities to internationally navigate the world, yeah, you need more than just curiosity. You need indeed knowledge, awareness, adaptation, adaptability, curiosity. Yeah, I mean, you need sensitivity. Basically, you already
Yeah.
said it beautifully.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with you. When you look at what companies you worked with for the last couple of years with your company, and if you can take out two or three biggest challenges you think that your clients face today, what would
Yeah,
be
yeah,
challenges?
yeah. Wow, that's a cool question. And you hear me struggle a bit because
There's so many of
every
them.
exact
How can you choose two or three?
no, and also of course some are not really there to put out on the World Wide Web. But the thing is, actually, there's two tendencies. One, uh, so first of all my clients are, let's say, international operating organization. That means that they or have colleagues from all over the world, or have business operations all over the world, or all of the above.
Yeah.
Um, and then they basically, I always say that I can put my clients into two categories. One, they really face challenges and we need to fix the challenges, or they don't face any challenges, or they believe that they don't have any problems or challenges, but they do want to invest in cultural awareness because they believe that it's the right thing to do for their people. It's part of
Okay.
their diversity and inclusion agenda or whatsoever. The funny thing is, the companies that think they don't have a problem, once we do awareness workshops, for example, always the problems arise, right? They are always like,
Ta-da.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, what are the biggest challenges that they then face is, to start with, they don't understand each other. So they end up in a bunch of miscommunications, misunderstandings, and they interpret communication differently. Um, some are really facing conflict. That can also happen, and that is because they waited too long to address
Yeah.
the issues that were present. Or what you can see is that, and that is a bit in line with miscommunication, misunderstanding, but that is basically they misinterpret what they think is the right thing to do, and that is not the right thing to do in different cultures. So example of that is, well, let's look at that Dutch company that missed that sales pitch in Brazil, right? Or that failed in that sales pitch.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that they also failed on is that Brazilians, they really, really invest in building the relationship in order to build trust, which is in the Netherlands very different, as you know, right? So uh, you sign a contract, you have some written agreements or whatsoever, but that is
You
enough
have a cup of coffee
in.
together in the office, and that's how it
Exactly.
goes.
Yeah, exactly. But Dutch people, culturally, they don't need to invest a lot of time in the relationship in order to build trust, right? So everyone is human relationship oriented, but in order to have trust to do business together, Brazilians do. So that Dutch company, the people that flew into Brazil, I think the sales pitch was planned at 11 a.m. or something. They flew out the same day.
Yeah.
And of course, the prospect, the potential client, invited them for dinner the same day. Said, let's have dinner tonight, which is a Brazilian way to build trust, to build a relationship, get to know each other. And they said, we cannot because we fly out. Yeah, that was a huge, huge issue, huge topic. Because if you know prior prior to that sales pitch, prior to booking your tickets, prior to, preparing yourself, that Brazilians need to build a relationship in order to trust you as a supplier, then obviously my advice would have been don't fly out the same day. Stay at least until the day after. Make sure that you don't block your or make sure to block time in your calendar to make sure that you can build on the relationship, right? Yeah. So I think missed business opportunities is very often because of cultural misinterpretation. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say, but it's the truth and the
Yeah.
reality.
And it can
It's
cost a
painful, but
lot
true.
of money. And you want to be a global operator, you want to be a global player, you need to have some knowledge. And maybe what you were saying, that only the Japanese knowledge, in your case at that moment, was not enough. But in this particular case, learning a little bit about the culture and understanding the differences and fine tuning on them. You don't have to be somebody else. You don't have to become Brazilian and talk with your hands and dance salsa or whatever. But yeah, they do dance
No,
salsa.
absolutely.
They
But
do that, no? Brazilians,
yeah,
when they do.
Brazilians dance bachata, I think. Or,
Ah, okay.
oh,
So
I don't know,
sorry,
huge
Brazilians.
failure.
I didn't mean the salsa. So I made my cultural blooper bomb right away. I hope there are no
Exactly.
Brazilian people who are listening today. Hmm.
And if they
Yeah,
are, then they'll probably forgive you. And potential, I mean, salsa is danced all over the world, right? So there's probably some Brazilians also that are into salsa. Anyway,
I,
it's
I
funny.
hope so. It's very temperamental, so it must be somewhere in the streets.
Yeah.
So you
No.
say
Yeah.
not understanding each other, taking this misunderstanding so far that it's already become a conflict, which spoils the cooperation, that spoils the collaboration, everything, and actually making mistakes and missing business due to
Yeah.
simple absence
Absolutely. Yeah.
of cultural awareness.
Yeah.
That that's
I
important.
think. Yeah, absolutely. And of course, there's a bunch of things to add, right? But I think what I see as a pitfall with many of my clients is that international organizations very often have company culture as well, right? So name it company values, somewhat of a DNA, or whatever name you want to call to it, but something that defines the organization and how we behave within the organization.
Yeah,
And many of my clients, and I love that, really, don't get me wrong, they really aim for that regardless of where people come from, culturally, nationality, regardless of where their business operates, it's the company culture that needs to uh,
be adopted.
unify.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that should be unified all over the world. And I agree with that. Absolutely. But
Hmm.
the challenge here is that the company culture very often comes or is born in the origin of the organization. So
In the headquarters.
basically, right, or the founder or whatsoever. And that is true because company culture or company values, uh, it's like DNA basically. So you cannot make them up. You need to give words to that what is already existent in the
Yeah.
organization. And so all of that is great, but the challenge is that company culture is very subject to interpretation. So let me give you a super simple example. I worked for the H&M group that is very value driven, very, very value driven organization. It's also very Swedish, actually. IKEA, Volvo,
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
are very value driven. And one of the company values at that time was we keep it simple. And we keep it simple, for me, being Dutch, means, we fight bureaucracy. We're not gonna, make a lot of processes or whatsoever.
Right.
That's my definition of we keep it simple. The Japanese definition of we keep it simple is as many processes as possible, document everything, because then it doesn't depend on the individual, but it depends on what is actually written out there.
Oh,
So
that is great.
extreme opposite, right? Like
Yeah.
extreme opposite. And that is, I think, of the pitfall of many of my clients is that, they want the company culture to be leading. They want the company or the organizational culture to give answers to all the questions that are out there and to unify people. But then the company culture is subject to cultural interpretation. And then, that is a challenge. So what I
How do you
do with
tackle it? I imagine it's not a process of a training or a
no,
workshop. It's
no,
just a
it's
5-year plan what
really,
you can take as an organization.
I mean, sometimes it's as simple as making a super clear clarification on what company value means. So, for example, we keep it simple as that example, really clarifying, okay, what does that mean for the organization and how do we then behave accordingly? So you stay away from words like we aim for, I don't know, the highest results possible. No, we only accept results above, I don't know, 60%, for example. And how do we then achieve that? And how do we want people to behave accordingly? And what are the certain situations or dilemmas that people within the organization face? And what does then the company value give that? Does that give the answer to the questions, yes or no? So
That
it's
is
sometimes
so
as simple as clarifying, and others time it's a 5-year plan where basically it's about cultural change. Yeah.
that is so interesting what you said, because when you were telling this, I was thinking, you know, uh, when we take Dutch company or German company or Swedish company, we are very, very low context cultures, right? So we actually very, very, we say what you mean it and how we mean it. But when we make our company's culture, we start to use these very fluffy words, which actually
Exactly.
mean
Yeah,
everything
you're
and
right.
nothing to. So how is that possible? That is
Yeah,
that is so funny.
no, but
That is
it's
very
absolutely true.
very
You're so
interesting.
right. Because, indeed, because, we're very explicit in our communication and we give words to everything and we expect words to be taken at face value. But then when we define company culture, yeah, we use so much fluff. It's true. We aim to fight bureaucracy. Yeah, what do you mean, right? Like, what does
Yeah,
that
yeah,
mean? Yeah.
yeah.
So no, and as you know, in international business, we benefit from being super explicit to the point. We benefit from what we call low context. Um, and that is why company culture, if you want your company culture to be leading across the globe and to unify all your employees, you need to make that extremely explicit. Extremely explicit. What does it mean and how do you want people to behave? Yeah.
That is such a great advice. I hope that the
Yeah.
leaders listen and they have this aha moment what I'm having, and I'm doing that for some time, and it's really like dawning on me. It's because I'm dealing with some of my clients also with the same issues, and that's like
Yeah.
so
No,
good
and
for
and,
them.
and I have one client with whom I'm actually they're defining their company culture in an intercultural environment, and basically you hear me. I'm working with a committee and a team and with the HR department and with people from the work floor and everything. But the question that you hear me ask in all these sessions is, okay, so what does that mean? Okay, thank you, but what does that mean? Okay, can you make that even more concrete? Okay, but
Yeah,
what does that mean? That is basically, on repeat, because yeah,
yeah,
things like in this company we respect each other. Yeah, congratulations, but what does that mean, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
you need to
I
make
have
that
this
very specific.
We have this Dutch leader who is always telling me about his Eastern European employees. They always talk about respect. What they mean?
Yeah, but what does it mean?
Yeah,
Because everyone wants to be respected, right? There is no culture in the world, none out there, that has nothing with respect, or that has nothing with the truth, or that has nothing with um, teamwork, but
it's
the
trust.
interpretation exactly, or trust. But how that then looks like is what differs. That is, yeah. Now, how did we get here? I don't know. I got super
No, we were
passionate
talking.
about it.
We're talking about the challenges, and it
Ah, yeah.
what getting back to the challenges. So we had this communication, we had this conflict, we had this
Mm,
misunderstandings on in basic level, just not having the right information, the right
yeah.
mindset going into the business. What are your out of your experience? What are there quick fix you can say? Okay, do
Mm,
that, and it happens, or
yeah.
what is your
No, I
experience? What is
think,
your advice?
yeah, no, listen, to be extremely transparent and honest with you, I think you can solve a lot, and you don't need people like me or you or my team or colleagues or whatsoever, with genuine curiosity. I think curiosity is the lowest hanging fruit, right? If
Yeah,
you are curious on how you see certain topics different than your colleagues, or different than your clients, or different than any other person coming from a different culture, I think, it's a great start, right?
yeah,
Curiosity solves a lot. Then I think another quick fix is to be a bit more humble. So instead of saying, oh, you're Eastern European, you're extremely brutal, you could also say, hey, you know what? I am from Brazil. I haven't learned to be as to the point as you are. Can you help me? So instead of pointing towards the other, looking a little bit more, or yeah, be humble, starting from yourself rather than
is
the
it
other.
is it not the one of the most challenging things a business person can do for him or herself,
Yeah,
to be humble?
absolutely. Yeah,
It makes you vulnerable. You want
yeah,
to be in
and
the business world, you want to come
but
professional and strong over.
absolutely, and I think um, the explanation for that is that because our brain has only one priority, and that is to keep us alive. And for that, it requires 24/7 assessment, right? 24/7 assessing threats, potential danger, whatsoever. That's the only priority. Other than that, our brain is super busy with, yeah, a hell lot of things during the day, and that's why our cultural reference, that what we neurologically have, really helps us, because it helps our brain to keep capacity for the things that really matter, like keeping
It
us
goes
alive.
automatic.
Yeah,
It doesn't have to think about it. Tuk, 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 tuk. Yes.
exactly.
Mhm.
It's the default, and that is also why it is very hard for us human beings, regardless of where we come from, regardless if we are leaders or owners of a company, to be humble, because the behavior of someone else that is different than our own, our brain assesses as a threat, right? So, oh, that's weird. She says something weird. Different. And then our brain goes into the mode of keeping us alive, which is why it makes it very hard to be humble, because our brain really wants to point at the
Yeah.
other, right? Really
Yeah.
wants, okay,
Exactly.
you're different, you're weird,
Yeah.
you're a threat,
Yeah.
alarm,
Yeah.
right? So it's very hard for us human beings to address differences, rather if they're individual or cultural, by being humble and starting from yourself and not pointing at the other, because this is not how our brain works.
Yeah.
This is the
Yeah.
reality.
Yeah. But if
So
we don't
yeah,
start it, we cannot expect the other one to start it. So it's two-way street, and we are the ones who need to start moving, I think. Yeah.
yeah, and I think if everyone, is a bit more humble, starting with their own, yeah, then I think, yeah, the world will be a better place. Let's put it like that.
Yeah.
Um, but back to business environment, I think the quick fixes. So general curiosity, um, and being humble. I think that helps a lot. Then just becoming aware, and I mean, you are already more aware if you listen to this podcast, but becoming aware on that we are wired differently depending on where we grew up already helps, right? Having that awareness already helps. Um, then another quick fix, and I don't know how, I mean, it also depends on what is the definition of quick, to be honest, or fix. But you can solve a lot by building strong relationships with people. And relationship building helps to build trust in many cultures in the world. So a lot of cultures need the relationship in order to trust each other. So
Mhm.
without that, it's hard for them to open up. It's hard to feel that there's trust. It's hard to raise their voice or speak their mind, etc. So I think you can solve a lot by building strong relationships, and that you can do across cultures, but even within your culture. Now, that is, I think, for many cultures, not really a quick fix, because a lot of cultures are not particularly interested in building relationships because they don't need it, right? So that I'm not saying that they're assholes. That's not what I mean. It's just that they don't need that in order to work together.
Yeah.
Now, I think if you have strong relationships, whatever mistakes you make afterwards land softer, right? You have a buffer. If we really like each other and we have a good relationship, and I accidentally call you an asshole as a slip of the tongue, it's more likely that that person will forgive me because of the relationship, right?
Yeah.
So I think those things you can do regardless of cultural differences,
Yeah.
become aware that we're different, be curious, be humble, and invest in the relationship.
Sounds good. Sounds good. And actually, when you say it, it's like, oh guys, it's so simple, huh? It's just like, hey, be curious, be open, be
Yeah, but
humble.
we don't do it. This is the reality.
Exactly.
No,
Exactly.
and yeah,
That is working on yourself in a conscious way every day, every moment, every situation, taking yourself out. And I think that, yeah, I think that this as well. We can be specialists, but this cultural bias what we have, it is so strong in us that sometimes I think we make mistakes as well, and I do it. I don't know about you, but I do it, and
of
it's really,
course.
I need to step out and say, okay, Len, hey, now let's go from automatic pilot and let's think about it. Let's be open. Let's be humble. I'm not saying that to myself, but actually that's what I'm doing. Yeah.
No, and absolutely. And again, our brain is wired in a certain way and has only one priority, and that's to keep us alive. So the behavior that we have as a default, the autopilot, is also the most comfortable for our brain, for our body. It's basically that what we do best, right? So uh, I still experience a bunch of cultural differences. I make a bunch of mistakes, and that is purely and only because my brain also goes in autopilot,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, I in this podcast even I use the word asshole. I know that there's many cultures that most probably pressed stop because for them that is so invasive because their brain cannot handle
Yeah.
swear words, as an example. Yeah, do I regret that? Yes. But is it,
Do
did
you
it
want me to cut
emphasize
it
the
out?
point?
Do you want me
No,
to cut it out?
exactly. Yeah. This was very high context way of asking
I,
if you can cut it out.
I would rather
No,
let it
no,
authentic, because I think that it's also, I think that swearing in other language is always easier because it doesn't have this weight of the words. So I understand what you mean.
absolutely. And I think in a business environment, right? So again, if you go on holiday to Thailand, understanding culture and cultural difference is a nice to have. But in a business environment, it is very essential to understand what are the consequences of your actions. So back to me using the word asshole. The fact that I am aware of what that does in certain cultures is already half of the solution, right? So in a business environment, it's the same thing. If you know what are the consequences, then you can navigate and deal with the consequences. Because I don't think, or let me rephrase that. I believe that if everyone can be their authentic self, you come to the best results. But then at least you need to understand
Yeah.
what the consequences are of your behavior in other cultures. So if you put someone from Japan in a group meeting on the spot, you need to understand that that has consequences, that that person feels really, really, really
Not
caught
safe.
off guard, etc., etc., and will not speak. And if for you as a leader it is important to get that person's opinion, you need to know how to get that opinion,
Yeah.
which is not putting someone on the spot. And then everyone can be their self, but you need to understand what happens if you press the certain buttons and if you need to press a different button in order
And
to get
then
what you
you
want.
can choose, and then you can choose what you can do. It doesn't mean that
Of
you need to be
course.
fake or somebody else, but it's just knowing the consequences, knowing what you are doing, that every action has a reaction. And what you expect.
Absolutely.
And when you
Absolutely.
don't expect it and your deal goes off, a million deal goes off. Yeah. Who is it to blame?
No, exactly. I think I always say if your business success depends on it, you have a different strategy than when it's just a nice to have, right?
Yeah.
So um simple example, I was thinking if this is something that I can share. Yeah, I think he will be okay with it. I'm working one-on-one with a CEO of an organization, um because that person needs to host basically a 3-day worldwide company seminar, right?
Okay.
And that person is extremely expressive, extremely extrovert, extremely expressive, but and uses a lot of body language. I don't know, people cannot
He's
see me, but
bigger
I'm
on
waving
stage.
with my
He's
hands. Yeah,
bigger on
exactly.
stage.
Absolutely. The challenge is that in a lot of cultures, and especially cultures that are less expressive or use body language as a different mechanism or tool to communicate, that is extremely distracting. So if that person is on stage waving his hands, making a lot of facial expressions, half of the audience is probably not listening anymore. And he asked me, yeah, but Coco, this is who I am. And I said, and I want you to be yourself, and I want you to um, be on stage for 3 days in a row in a way that suits you best. But I do want you to be aware of what are the consequences of you using your body language, using your hands to talk, making a lot of facial expressions, because then you can deal with those consequences. For example, checking in with half of the audience to see if they're still with you,
Yeah.
or having an additional break, or announcing, hey, you know what, I am someone that is very expressive. I talk with my hands. I know that that is distracting. Please help me and remind me of. Because
Yeah.
of course I want every CEO to be the best version of themselves, but I also want them to be aware of what the consequences are of those certain actions.
Very
If he's
important.
listening to this, I sincerely hope that he will not throw me in front of the bus. He doesn't feel that I threw him in front of the bus, but I
Yeah.
think he's
You
okay
only
with
can
this.
do yourself, and then actually, you can teach people as much as they want to learn, right? That's
That's
one of
beautiful.
the
Yeah, I love that.
that's one of the thing about the job we are doing. You can bring that much, and you can try to take them as much, but it's on them to put this knowledge into action.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks.
If people who are listening today want to know more about you, or want your advice, or want your services, how can
Yeah.
they find you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think this is the most simple question of the whole podcast. However, my whole website is going through a change. So
Okay.
let's do it like this. I am the most active on LinkedIn, which is you can find me on my own name, yeah, of course, also on the company name, but it's Coco Hofs, which is
We will put it in the
uh,
subtitles
sub
in
super super.
yeah.
There, I'm the most active, and I engage a lot. Every message that I get, I will reply myself. Everything that you see there comes out of my own pen. And then from there, you can, of course, find the rest of my contact details. But I would say on LinkedIn is the best bet.
So guys, Coco Hofs on LinkedIn, you know where to find her. Coco, I want to thank you for the useful insights on the importance of the cultural awareness. And, actually, I want to acknowledge you for, first of all, for the work you are doing, because I share your passion and I share your vision. And now talking to you feels a little bit like talking to myself, a little bit. And I do believe that the business world needs more people like you and me to become an inclusive, let's use this again, this container term, and in a simpler way, a nicer place to work. But I also want to acknowledge your generosity for sharing your knowledge and the tips today and the examples. I think it's they are very, very useful. And I think that every leader who was listening today can start tomorrow and use this and start today. I will be more curious, start the morning with today I will be more curious, today I will try to be more humble, or something like that. So thank you very much.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me. It has been a real pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Guys, if you have never thought about this topic before, I'm sure that after listening to Coco and her story, and listening to the differences she and her colleagues from Cross Cultural Solutions are making for organizations and people who work in those organizations, you understand that next to all these important management and leadership skills, understanding the cultural difference and understanding the effect of those cultural difference on your business is becoming one of the most powerful professional tools. So if you feel inspired by Coco and you want to learn more, you want to become more confident in navigating this multicultural landscape we work in today, join me in 2 weeks for more tips and insight on Bending Culture podcast with a new guest. And guys, I have a personal ask. Bending Culture is just starting out, so your support means the world. So please subscribe, leave a review, or just share this episode with a fellow global game changers. Until I see you again, this is Elena from Cross Cultural Development. Let's keep bending culture together to shape a thriving, inclusive business world. Thank you, Coco, and thank you, everybody. Bye bye.